Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Finding Your Path, Path of the Just, Mesilas Yesharim by Rabbi Chaim Letzato. We're exploring this together. We got to the sixth parak, the sixth chapter, Parak Vov. And we've now finished the section which deals with Zehirut, which means watchfulness, care, thinking, making sure we don't transgress negative mitzvahs, as they're called. From now on, this next couple of prakim deal with the converse of that, mitzvahs aseh, positive mitzvahs. And the epithet that's acquired to the success in fulfilling positive mitzvahs is called zerizus, zerizut, which means alacrity. As we'll see, the basis for being able to do positive mitzvahs is this character trait of getting things done, starting them quickly, and finishing them off without delay. This is really the basic outline of what he's going to say. Says the Mechaber, says the Mesilas Yesharim, and we're at the beginning now of Perek Vav. Acha has zehirus yavo zrizas. After watchfulness, carefulness, comes alacrity, zrizas. Ki azrizas soyev al halosase, as I said before, zehirus, watchfulness revolves around mitzvahs losase, not breaking negative commandments, not transgressing the don't do commandments of the Torah. And zrizas ala ase, zrizas, alacrity, is concerned with how do you say? With positive, thank you, with positive mitzvahs. V'hainu, and that's, Chazal teaches, sur meira va'aseh tov. Turn aside from doing evil and do good. What he's saying here is basically that there's an order to the way a person has to conduct his life. A person can't do good if he hasn't turned away from evil. A person, if he tries to do good, if he tries to serve Hashem through doing the positive mitzvahs, Chazal talk about that as somebody who's toiveling, he's going to the mikveh with a sheretz, with a rat in his hand, with a dead, impure animal. It's not going to work. The principle is always that a person has to turn aside from doing what he shouldn't be doing, and then that leaves the field open, so to speak, for him to start to do positive mitzvahs, start to be close to Hashem. Now, it's often pointed out, I do apologize. It's often pointed out that when somebody comes to Ohr Somayach, let's say, this is probably more true in times of yore, when Rabbi Schuster, Meir Schuster, Zeichet Livrocha, who was a famous personality, Yerushalmi personality, who used to stand all day and much of the night at the Kosel, going up to people who looked Jewish, and he would say to them, "Are you Jewish?" And if they answered in the affirmative, he said, "Do you want to come and hear a Torah class?" And he would yank them off, and it's amazing how successful he was. And I don't think I'm out of line to say that when you met him, you didn't see why there was something so compelling about him. He wasn't somebody who was like, like enormously, obviously charming. He just had this sort of air of authenticity and some way to connect to that, the Yiddish and the Neshama, the Jewish soul, that he was remarkably successful. And also the bottled B'chaim Tovim, Jeff Seidel. Rabbi Schuster used to schlep people in to hear a Torah lecture at Ohr Somayach, at Eshet Torah. And the question is, how can, if the principle is so meira va'aseh tov, how can you sit somebody down and start to teach them Torah? And more than that, at Ohr Somayach especially, to plunge them straight into the heart of Gemara. I mean, why isn't it what you call it? Aren't they first all going to have to stop eating what they shouldn't be eating and give up their non-Jewish girlfriend and v'chule, etc., etc. So the answer, I think, is that the Mesilas Yesharim here is addressing religious people. He says at the beginning, you're not going to. This book is addressed to people who know that the Torah is true and have no problem with that and everything. They accept everything, but putting that knowledge into action is very challenging. It's the Mesilas is essentially addressed to a religious audience, but religious in the sense that people, let's say, who came from a religious background, people who nominally are religious but understand that their service of Hashem is very lacking. And this book is a book which helps to, and has been remarkably, incredibly successful over the years in achieving that effect of bringing people up, elevating them spiritually to high levels. When you have somebody who's coming in off the street, I think the idea why we interest them is that if you're going to sit down and tell him, look, I'm sorry, buddy, before we're going to teach you any Torah, you're going to have to get rid of your iPhone, and you're going to have to get rid of your girlfriend, and you have to get rid of that, this, that, and the other. Ohr Somayach and Yeshivat Torah would be pretty empty. The fact of the matter is that we're addressing people who are maybe open enough to say, look, show me something that I can understand, and maybe then I'll consider changing my life. But just to change my life, give it all up just because you say I got to do that before you open the box and show me what's in the Torah. I'm sorry, bye-bye. I'm on the next plane to Nepal. So, you have to cater for your audience. And the audience of the sort of person who's grown up in a secular environment, and maybe he's looking, for sure he's looking. He wouldn't want to come and hear what's the Torah about anyway, but you have to show him something that he's going to want to latch onto. And clearly Chazal say that is not the ideal way, but there's this thing called Shasad Chak, a time of, of necessity, where that's the only way that it's going to work. And for sure, showing somebody the beauty of the Torah, the complexity of the Torah, the brilliance of the Torah, the fact that the Torah cannot have been written, does not come from a human mind. And when you show a person the beauty of a Shabbos table, and that connects to a person on a very, very deep level, and then maybe he'll be able to sit down and start to think about analyzing what he is not doing so well, what he shouldn't be doing. That's, I think, the answer to the question. But we're talking about here, of course, as we said before, what we've discussed up to now is Sur Meira, turning aside from evil, V'asei Tov, and doing good. So, and now the next paragraph, he says, V'inyono shel hazihirus, hazrizus, mavoa shehu hakdama lemitzvos v'ashlomas inyonam. The subject of zrizus, alacrity, is explained. And what does that mean? It is the hakdama. Now, hakdama doesn't usually means in Hebrew introduction. Here it doesn't mean that. It means advancing towards. Rabbi Yonason Wiener told me once, there's an interesting word. We have in English the word to postpone. Now, ostensibly there's no converse for postpone. You could say to bring forward. But an actual converse, a flip side of postpone, there doesn't seem to be in English, but there is. He told me it's not in the Oxford English Dictionary, but it's in the Oxford Indian English Dictionary. There is a word to prepone. To prepone is the exact opposite of to postpone. So when he's talking about to lahakdim, it means to prepone, to bring the mitzvah, to go and do it quicker, to do it in the quickest possible way. That's the idea of zrizus, to rush, to find, to fight, to go, to do. When a mitzvah comes to your hand, as we're going to see later on, mitzvah bal yodcha al tachmitzena. If a mitzvah comes to your hand, don't let it go chomitzdik. Don't let it become stale, fermented. Mitzvah bal yodcha al tachmitzena. Zrizim magdimim lemitzvahs, as he says. Zrizim go ahead and they magdimim, they prepone their mitzvahs. They advance them. But he also says something else, which is going to be very important, hashlamas inyonam, and to complete them. The idea is zrizus breaks into two parts, falls into two parts. The alacrity, the speed, the persistence, the proactiveness to find the mitzvah, to do the mitzvah, but to finish the mitzvah. And we're going to see Chazal prescribe very serious punishments for somebody who starts a mitzvah and just leaves it. There's a great danger, as he's going to talk about, that once a person starts to do something, all kinds of things come up. It's incredible how they just seem to emerge out of the woodwork. And a person has to be very, very careful that once he started a mitzvah, he should finish it, complete it, until it's perfect. Hashlama, it's mushlam, it's complete. We said, Hazeh Amru Zechron Lefrocha, it says in Psachim Zrizim Magdim LeMitzvahs, those who are alacritus prepone their mitzvahs. V'zeh ki kamo shetzorech pikchus gedola v'hashkafa rabba lehinotzel mimokshe hayetze ulemolet minara. And he says, just as we need great pikchus, wisdom, mi chacham, haroes anolad, somebody who sees the future, who sees, or at least maybe not the future, he sees what can be engendered by a certain path of action. So that's called pikchus, having your eyes open. Great. This is talking now about, of course, zihirus, not transgressing a mitzvah. Just as you need great pikchus, awareness and hashkafa rabbah, and a great hashkafa means literally to look. In this case, I think he means that it's like an overview of a wisdom and a clarity of view to make sure that you linotzel, you save yourself mimokshe hayetza, from the traps, the snares of the yetzer hara, v'limolet minara, and to avoid evil. Two kinds of evil here. One is mokshe hayetza. A trap is something which is concealed. The yetzer hara is good at setting traps, things that we don't realize to be evil. And there's also evil itself. A person has to be careful to steer clear of evil that is definitely evil. And why? Because sometimes a person can find all kinds of reasons why he will justify what is clearly not right. A person has tremendous amounts of cheshbonos, of calculations, of why I need to do this right now, Shalo yishlod bonu lis orev b'ma'aseinu. That we have to be very careful that either hidden wrongs or openly bad, evil things do not sneak their way in to our actions. So just as we have to be very careful, have great perspicacity, insight, breadth of vision, awareness, not to let the yetzer hara sneak into our minds and cause us to stumble and do transgress mitzvahs, lo sa'aseh, negative mitzvahs. Cain, similarly, you need the same qualities of wisdom, foresight, breadth of vision, roinus anolad, see what's going to be engendered from your actions, in order to grasp the mitzvahs, v'liskos bahen, and to be zoiche in them, meaning to finish them off, to have the schus, to complete them. V'shalot vadno mimenu, and not let them be lost from him. Ki kamo shemasabev umishtadel hayetzer hara betachbulo sov lahapil es ha'odam b'michmoiros achet. Just as the yetzer hara goes around a person, how do you say, he sneaks around, he surrounds him, not quite the word, I can't think of the word, he goes around him, and he tries to, with his tricks, to bring him down, bring a person down into the nets of sin. Cain, mishtadel, he similarly works hard, works limnoa mimeno asiyas mitzvahs, to prevent a person from doing a mitzvah. Ula abdom mimenu, and cause them to be lost from him. Ve'im yisraper v'yitzatzel. This is his point. If a person weakens and is lazy, v'lod yischazek lirudof achareim, if a person doesn't strengthen himself to run after them, v'litmoch bam, and to grab them, to support them, to do them, Yishavat Ohr, he will find himself bereft, v'reik mehem bevadai, and empty from his positive, he won't have any positive mitzvahs. So this key thing here is the idea of not being laziness. And he's going to go on to discuss how the nature of a person is essentially lazy. We're going to see in the next paragraph, he's going to say, Odom min ha'ofor, man comes from the ground. The ground, earth, man is made of earth. Earth sinks down, earth is heavy. Earth is inert. Earth, man requires a motivating force to move him. His natural position, his default position is to lie on the beach with a gin and tonic. That is the nature of the human being. That is the physical part of a human being. My Rabbi once told me an interesting, somebody came to me, one of my Talmidim, and he said, look, I have a great deal of difficulty getting up in the morning for davening. Does this sound familiar? So this is a common problem. And he came to me and said, what should I do? So I asked my Rebbe, and he told me, tell him that everything he does in the day, he should run to it. Even the things he loves to do. It's time for lunch, run to lunch. It's time to, whatever it is, to go out in the evening somewhere to meet his parents, should run to do it. He should, everything in the day he should do, he should run. Should run. Not just to the things that he needs to go to and he doesn't particularly want to do, especially those things that he wants to do and he enjoys doing. And the secret is as follows, that Zrizot, like all of the things the Ramchal is talking about, all of these are midot. A midot is a character trait. A character trait, all of us have character traits, some of us and we all have all the character traits to a certain extent, but some people have more than others, others have less than others. So everybody has the midah of zehirut, naturally. Everybody has the midah of zrizut, naturally. But many of us have much more of one midah than another midah, but that doesn't mean that every midah that exists we can't amplify. And therefore, when a person amplifies the midah of zrizus by running everywhere, he will find that he will, this midah will be inculcated inside him. And he will be able to use the midah. That's the point. This really brings us on to another very fundamental idea, which is called acharei pa'ulos nimshechim alavavos. After the actions are drawn the heart. There's a sefer called the Sefer Chinuch. Nobody's quite sure who wrote it. Probably it was written, I think it may have even been written by a Rishon. I forgot now. But the Sefer Chinuch was written, and it was written for this Rishon for his son to learn on Shabbos afternoon. And in Mitzvah Tes Zayin, I believe, which is the mitzvah not to break the bones of the Korban Pesach. There's a mitzvah when in the times when we had the Pesach sacrifice, and of course all Klal Yisrael would have their Korban Pesach along with their Seder, there was a mitzvah not to break the bones of the Korban Pesach. So the Sefer Chinuch explains why that is. He says because on the night of Pesach we are like malachim, we're like princes, kings. And it is not the way of kings and princes to break open the bones to get the last little bit of, of the marrow inside the bone, the last bit of the marrow of the jelly. It's not princely. And therefore, that's the reason, one of the reasons that we should not break open the bone of the Korban Pesach. And then he goes on to a long, long arichut, a long discussion, a long digression. And he says, and you should ask me, my son, why is it that we need so many mitzvahs to remember Pesach. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch, there's a whole, in Mishnah Berurah, the whole of Vav is all about Pesach. It's why do we need a whole sif, a whole krach, a whole volume about Pesach? If the whole idea to remember Pesach is fine, okay, we'll not have chametz around, eat some matzah, but all of the Hagalas Kelim and all of the minutiae of how you make the matzah, how you don't make the matzah, the moro, the dalakoisos, why is it that we need so many mitzvahs? And he said, if you should ask me, my son, this question, you will not be asking wisely, because you should know that Adam nifal lefi pu'olotav. A person is drawn after his actions. He says it a slightly different way. Acharei pu'ulos nimshechim alavavois. After the heart, after the actions are drawn the heart. When a person does something, and even if he does it in a way which is not necessarily for its essential intention, here we're talking about doing mitzvahs with alacrity when the nature of a person is essentially, his default position is inertia. And how do we develop that? We develop that by using our ability to run after things that we want to do, and mimela automatically, without us realizing it, this will be mashresh, this will instill into us this midah of alacrity of zrizas. Rav Dessler speaks about this in Kuntras HaChesed as well. He has a pamphlet, an essay on chesed, on kindness. And he speaks of an interesting, the idea basically is that, to paraphrase what he said, he doesn't say it quite like this, but in the Second World War, in the Blitz on London, the bombing was so severe that many parents sent their children to Canada and places far away from the bombing. And they were separated from 1939 to 1945. Now that's a long time in the development of a relationship between a parent and a child when the child is at a certain age. And he describes how the children came back, and there was a definite difference between the depth of the relationship between the parents and the children who'd stayed together, because not all the families, sometimes the families were split up and some of the children would stay with the parents. And those children who'd spent that long 4 years away from their parents. Clearly the relationship between the parents and the children of those children who'd gone over to Canada was lacking something. And this really illustrates the principle. A parent is constantly, certainly at a certain age, maybe until quite advanced ages, in the role of giving to their children. Parents giving. From the moment the child is born, a parent gives. The nature of a person when he gives is he loves to whom he gives. The Kuntras HaChesed dwells on this point. A person tends to think that you like somebody, you like someone, and therefore you give to them. He says that's true, but the reverse is also true. You love who you give to. You love who you give to. When you give, giving brings to love. Actions lead to emotions. It's not just that emotions lead to actions. It took behavioral psychology a few hundred years to come up with this. Essentially, behavioral psychology says, how do you want to get somebody out of their depression? You make them run around. The actions lead to emotions. Actions produce feelings. It's not just the other way around. And that's, in a sense, maybe one of the reasons why that we put the tefillin, first of all, on the arm, which is the part of the action of the body, before we put it on the head. Actions lead to thoughts. A person wants to be holy, he wants to have holy thoughts, he first of all has to do holy actions. The Sefer HaChinuch describes how a person, if he's a bailiff, if his entire life is spent kicking people out of their homes because they've defaulted on their debts, even though he may be a big tzaddik, he'll become a rasha. Immediately he's going to become a rasha. Because when a person, even though he's good inside, but he does actions of rishus, of actions of evil, dispossessing people, putting people out onto the street, inevitably this will change how he feels. What am I trying to get across here? The whole point of zerizus is that zerizus is a midah, is a character trait, and like every character trait, it can be strengthened or it can be weakened. And the way you strengthen it is to habituate yourself in it, even in situations where it's very nice to run to do the thing that you want to do. It doesn't matter. And that was my Rebbe's advice. Run to do a mitzvah. He once told us a joke. This conversation took place in Yiddish when he was in Chicago. So he remembers as a young boy running out of the house to go and do something naughty, whatever it was. And his grandmother shouted to him as they were going, "Where are you going to?" In Yiddish, of course, "Where are you going to?" So they shouted back, "We're running to do a mitzvah." So she shouted after them, "To a mitzvah you don't run." When a person finds himself, I mean, of course you should, but when a person finds himself running anywhere, and we talked about this actually, he should question why he's running. Because many times it's the Yetzer Hara getting him to run to somewhere where he shouldn't be. But if a person can use that midah of zrizus, not, God forbid, to go after what he shouldn't be going after, but to use that alacrity, and as we say, to train himself whenever he can, to use that alacrity, eventually he'll find himself being able to apply that. It'll become part of his arsenal, part of his toolbox, of his emotional, part of his psychological toolbox, that he can apply that and use that to work on his avodas Hashem, to run to do mitzvahs, and to finish them and to complete them. Okay, and this is really what he's going to say in the next paragraph. And you see, Ki teva ha'adam kaved ma'od. The nature of a person is extremely heavy. Ki afrius hachumrius gas. Because the afrius, afar, the dustiness, not dustiness, not the right word, the quality of earth, the earthiness, maybe, hachumrius of physicality, is coarse. Al kain, therefore, lo yachpoitz, lo yachpoitz. Try again. Al kain, lo yachpoitz ha'odam b'toirach u'malocha. That is why a person doesn't want to bother himself, and he doesn't want to malacha. He doesn't want the malacha. Malacha, we're talking about melechas Hashem, serving Hashem. It's a burden. Umi sharotze liskois la'avodas haboris boch. Somebody who wants to merit to be a servant of the King, to serve Hashem, tzarech sheyizgaber neged tivo atzmoi v'yizgaber v'yizdorez. And therefore, somebody who wants to be a servant of Hashem, he needs to dominate his nature itself. He's, in a sense, he's got to work on that, and his whole self does not want to do this. The physical side of the person does not want to do this. And he has to, v'yizgaber, use the word again, he has to dominate, v'yizdorez, and he has to be, mizdarez means to chivvy himself up. It's to make himself, to acquire this midah of alacrity, of zrizus. She'im hu maniach atzmo biyad kvedusa. Because if a person abandons himself, places himself in the hand of his natural, I'm putting in heaviness, vadaihu shalo yatzliach, he will certainly not succeed. V'hu masha oma hatana, that's what the Tana says in Avos, right? Very famous statement. Comes right at the beginning of the Shulchan Aruch. The code of law, how a Jew is supposed to behave to get the most out of this world. And it's a very famous saying, Have az kanema kal kanesha rotz katzvi gibor ka'ari la'sos tzon avicha shebashamayim. Have be az kanome, as brazen as a leopard. Kal kanasha nesha, as light as an eagle. Run like a deer, and be as brave as a lion, to do the will, asos ritzon avicha shebashamayim, of your Father in heaven. All of these midot are the midas of zrizut. Az, to be brazen, to not give in. Kal, to be light, the opposite of the kvedus of the physicality of a person. Ratz, run, the opposite of sitting and all the more so lying. Gibor, to be brave against your natural instinct of repose, like a lion, in order to do the will of your Father in heaven. That's the only way a person can do it, is to go against his natural physical heaviness. And similarly, Chachamim enumerated for us that the things, b'devarim hatzrichim chizuk, the things that require, and I'll put in the word, constant reinforcement. Torah u'masim tovim. Torah and masim tovim. The nature of a person is he doesn't want to exert himself to learn. Learning Torah is very hard. It's very tiring. It is something which, of course, has tremendous reward and can have tremendous pleasure, but it can also be extremely hard work. And it requires chizuk for that reason. A person needs to push himself to understand, push himself to turn up on time, push himself to make sure he has a good night's sleep, to be mitchazek. Umasim tovim. Also, the nature of a person is that he can't be bothered. Now, of course, as I said before, each one of us have these midot to a greater or lesser extent. There are some people who are naturally very generous, and they find masim tovim very, very much easier to do than other people. But the general nature of a person is that he's lazy and selfish. These are things which come from the body's desire to look after itself and not look at other people, and the body's desire to just take it easy and do as little as absolutely possible. Umikra molehu, and we have many psukim, as it says in Yeshayahu, Chazak ve'amatz mo'oid lishmo lasos kol haTorah asher tzivcho Moshe avdi. Hashem says through the prophet Yeshayahu, Chazak, be strong. Ve'ematz, and another word for being strong. Very much so, ma'od, to guard, to do all of the Torah which I commanded you through Moshe, my servant. Which Moshe, my servant, commanded you. Ki chizuk gadol sarich lemisha rotze lichpois hateva el hefko. Because a great deal of strength is required by somebody who wishes to dominate his nature and reverse it. Okay, I think we'll leave it here today, and we'll come back to these ideas, and we'll finish off the chapter next week. It's not a lot to finish off. Well, no, there's quite a lot. But I hope these ideas will stand you in good stead for the week to come. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll meet again next week. Kol tov.